Welcome to Campus Consortium's EdTalks webinar series. Our presenters for today's session are Dominic Veneto, Chief Information Officer at Jacksonville University, Ted Simpson, Managing Director at Huron Consulting Group, and Dr. Carl Horvath, President at Campus Consortium. We will take questions at the end of today's presentation. Please enter the question into the chat box or questions pane in your Zoom control panel. Without further ado, please allow me to introduce Dominic Veneto, Ted Simpson, and Dr. Carl Horvath. Over to you, Carl.
Thank you, Lily, and hello everyone out there. Thank you for joining us today. This is Campus Consortium's EdTalk webinar series, and today's title of today's webinar is Evaluating a Next Generation Student Information System, and we have a couple of special guests that I'll introduce in a minute. But first, I wanted to give a shout out to over 160 webinar attendees today. Thank you for taking the time. We'll take the next hour and make sure that there's some good information that hopefully you can use for your institutions. I'd like to say hello to Arizona State University, Emory University, Carnegie Mellon University's out there, Harvard Business School, Tufts University, Bucknell University, Bryn Athyn College is out there. Hi, Leela. East Stroudsburg and Jersey City University, Louisiana State University, Georgia Institute of Technology. And those are the US attendees. We also have our friends from the University of Fiji that are attending today. So big welcome to the team there at University of Fiji. I also would like to introduce, or at least acknowledge, some of our sponsors today. We are being sponsored by Huron Consulting Group, and we do have Ted from Huron with us today, who's going to be a guest speaker, but strictly about the subject matter. And I thank Huron for being allowing us to bring this topic to the higher education community. Also want to give a shout out to a couple of attendees who are vendors, not higher eds, and that is Oracle and Ellucian and Strata SIG. So thanks for attending, everybody. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Campus Consortium before we get started. Campus was founded in 2003 and has been working with higher education and K through 12 school districts for many years. The Campus Consortium mission is really to help members reduce time, cost, and effort associated with educational technology. And it's collaboration, it's sharing, and it's finding the most cost-effective but state-of-the-art practices and systems and software for higher ed. Higher ed is definitely a different sector than for-profit, and so we're here to help with higher education and education in general technology needs. So what we want to try to do is have schools avoid reinventing the wheel when adopting new technologies and bring the best and most capable technologies to them. We also do have a program at Campus Consortium about CIS-ERP requirements discovery and RFP design service, which we work with higher education peer advisors and consultants to come into a institution or on campus and try to evaluate your student information system, ERP, as well as kind of provide you with a complete report and a RFP ready document for your CIS-ERP journey. If you would like to know more about this, please visit the Campus Consortium website or contact us at the email address on this presentation. I'd like to start out with a poll question before I introduce our speakers and talk about today's topic. To get some interactive participation from the audience, please. And what we would like to ask, this will be one of 3 poll questions we're going to roll today. What is the status of your institution's CIS-ERP? Are you satisfied? It works well, no plans for change? Are you curious in considering options, or do you need change? Your current system presents challenges. If you could just take the next 30 seconds to answer this poll questions, be interested to see the opinion and status of our attendees today. There is some documentation that we did a little research on before putting this webinar together, and that is kind of looking at the information about studies and work that has been done around student information exploration and evaluation. 2019, EDUCAUSE posted some information about the trouble of today's student information systems that have been around for decades. You know, if they were created back in the 80s or back in the 90s, they may not and most likely do not work with today's students' needs and today's institutional needs because so much has changed. Some of these bullet points here you can see legacy systems designed to work as monoliths, as difficult and costly to integrate. We know that the code that was used to write these systems many years ago has certainly changed over the years. Just wanted to take a minute here to address the poll results. Here's the poll results. Very, very interesting. And no wonder everybody's attending today. Looks like most folks need change. Current systems present challenges. Yes, and I'm many years higher ed CIO myself, been faced with so many challenges with these legacy systems and always looking for change. We need real change today. It's not just because these systems are outdated, but certainly COVID and the pandemic has emphasized the need for us to be agile and be able to customize quickly and work more deliberately and effectively online. And not all the student information systems and ERPs out there allow us to do that. So we'll have a good discussion around that. Thank you, audience, very much for participating in this poll. EDUCAUSE did write about the user interface, of course, which is not very effective today. It's certainly not web-enabled in many systems. The data and the complex relationships that databases have make it difficult and slow to get reporting out of these systems and to analyze data. Very important that so many schools really need to get involved more into data analytics and data governance. It's very hard to do with some of these legacy systems. Scalability, older student information systems were just not designed to scale. So as your institution grows or decreases in size, these systems don't adjust to your needs. Also, there's outdated models, assumptions about academic systems, traditional design of terms and degrees. We know that's changed as our student populations have changed over the years. 2010, we had a sharp decrease in the traditional undergraduate students, and new student populations have emerged since then, and not all the systems out there are prepared to deal with these students. And of course, product end of life, vendors eventually stop providing software updates, creating security. Security issues are very big issues with student information systems, and especially with the ERP portions of these systems that hold financials and critical data that just can't be shared or compromised. Very important that our systems are equipped to handle security issues. Also got this from Unit 4, the evaluation criteria for SIS, and we'll be hearing more about this from our speakers. Is it a comprehensive solution, meeting the needs of your learners? You really have to think about students first. Is that information going to be served up to them in the appropriate and timely manner? Does it have actionable retention solutions? Retention's so critical today as we have to really hang on to every one of the students that we have. We can't afford them to leave. Are our systems prepared to meet the needs of the students and retain them? Is there an integrated ERP for the business processes? Mobile, consumer grade experience, web interface, all very important as today's consumers are very concerned about being able to access information and transact using mobile devices and portable devices, very different than sitting at a desk at a computer all day. So let's get into the conversation. I would like to introduce our two guest speakers today. Our first speaker is Dominic Veneto. He's currently the Chief Information Officer at Jacksonville University. He's a longtime education IT leader, having worked in a variety of educational institutions at a strategic level. He's guided teams through some of the most challenging student information system and ERP projects and initiatives. Dominic's transformational philosophy of evaluating and replacing systems includes the promotion of intentionally developmental working groups focused on middle out and up sustainable organizational change. And I'd like to hear more about that. I heard about that a little bit earlier when I talked to Dominic. Very fascinating work that he's doing with this and has been successful over multiple organizations. Currently, Dominic is at Jacksonville University, which is a private university in Jacksonville, Florida. Jacksonville University offers more than 100 majors, minors, and programs at the undergraduate level, as well as 23 master's and doctoral degree programs. Our other speaker is Ted Simpson. Ted Simpson is the managing director at Huron Consulting Group. Ted has more than 2 decades of experience in higher education, operations, and consulting with a focus on strategy creation, project management, and organizational development. He is an Oracle subject matter and technical expert who has advised on countless implementations of the firm's students' financial, enterprise resource planning, and human capital management solutions. He leads institutions through cloud assessments and strategy development, helping manage all aspects of project management, quality assurance, and business process optimization. Huron Consulting Group, commonly known as Huron, is a management consulting firm offering services to the healthcare, life sciences, commercial, and higher education industries. And Ted did confide in me that he's also been a registrar in the past. So I think that's going to be really helpful as we move ahead with this conversation, particularly to the higher ed and attendees. So thank you both for joining us here today. And I'd like to hand it over to Dominic to start. And this will be an interactive conversation. Ted and Dominic certainly get into, talking about some of the points on the slides, but we'll also be going back and forth in a conversation. Dominic, take it away, please.
Thanks, Carl. Appreciate the opportunity, and good afternoon to everyone. One of the things that Carl and I spoke about the first time we talked was implementing ERP and student information systems, and how we've gone about this in the past at the various institutions where I've done this. This is the 4th time I've done this now, and that might make me slightly more crazy than others on this call, but we've done it at a couple independent schools and a higher ed institution, and also going way back to Harvard University in the early 90s, where there was a consolidation of financial systems. So one of the things that I have found really beneficial in doing this is involving folks who work in the middle of the organization in the process. And that, to me, is really the game changer in terms of doing this well and having successful outcomes. We have, for the most part, involved everyone from, usually about 20 to 25 people from all of the areas on campus that are impacted by ERP and student information systems. So everything from admissions through advancement, all of the student service areas, HR, finance, even include things like facilities and security and others in the others who have interest in outcomes from projects like this. So what we do is typically we've been meeting once a week, and meeting schedules are often tough to coordinate with a large group like that. So knowing that everyone needs to eat lunch, and this is sort of pre-pandemic talking, but also during the pandemic, we've been doing the same thing, although virtually now. And we gather around a lunch table, meet for an hour. And one of the ways we do this is really start talking about business process and our work together at the university, and where the connections are, what works well, what doesn't work well, and where those conversations lead us is where we end up. And sometimes that is the need to replace a ERP or a student information system, to think a little bit differently about the way we conduct the day-to-day business of our university. To keep us focused, I've asked our teams to flip their thinking a little bit, just much like we flip classrooms these days and teaching and learning. And the reason for doing this is, if you can imagine, when you think about the type of change that we're talking about here, it is significant. When you talk about, forklifting an ERP or a student information system and bringing in something new, that's a fairly significant change for people to contemplate. In flipping the thinking, what we ask them to do really is, normally you would think about that kind of change. You'd think about yourself first, how it's going to impact you. You would think about your department then, and then you would think about the university. What we ask is that you think university first in all of our conversations. What it does is help us approach this in a little bit more of a holistic way, where we're asking folks to stay focused on a bigger picture, if you will, understanding that you represent yourself when you come into this meeting and you have an awful lot of information about the area where you work. You have likely, if you're in the middle of the organization, been mired in the workflow problems that we're talking about. And you also represent your department. But if we maintain that university first perspective, it really helps us get to a very good place as we continue the conversation and the discussions about needs. And as we think about how we would want to see our university working in the future, I think it's a very good approach, and it's worked quite well. Oftentimes you're able to bring the group back from discussions that start to sink a little bit down into the weeds by reminding them that you want to start having the conversation a little bit higher level at the university, from a university first perspective. So it's worked quite well. The other thing that the benefit for me of the working groups is that you have an opportunity as a thought leader on your campus to help folks in some sense, one way or another, become leaders themselves on the campus. And that's where these working groups make a difference as well, I think, is the sense that folks really do get to grow in levels. And if you're familiar at all with intentionally developmental teams or organizations, you really do try to help folks change and grow within their roles on the campus. And it's both professional development and personal development as well. So not only are you doing something good functionally for your institution in terms of finding efficiencies and cost savings and improving systems and things like that, but the impact of a working group on your campus is really a go-to team that for decades makes an impact on your campus, because this is a team that people come to rely upon even after the process is over. Working groups that I've been involved in on other campuses continue to meet. They become the team that that organization, that institution uses to vet new applications, to talk about change, to talk about what's working well, what's not working well. And they really do become an effective part of the organization. They become new leaders on campus, which is critically important for any institution, I think, to develop that type of personal growth with people, and professional growth as well.
Dominic, before you move on, if I could chime in on a couple of those points. I love the approach. I have not heard the flip the thinking vernacular until now, so I do appreciate that. I think that maps really well into something that we've used very effectively on our projects at Huron. Setting some guiding principles that can follow through the entire project and beyond. And I love the idea of university first. As we all know who have been through it, a university setting can be a rocky terrain with small hills that many people are willing to die on. But if you're flipping that around and saying, from a guiding principle perspective, how is this advancing the mission of the university? It often can unwind some of the challenges you have. The other comment I would make on your comment around sustainable change, there's a study, I don't have it handy, but it's a few years old, that IBM did that we like to cite. And they surveyed something like 180 organizations that had gone through a large transformational change successfully. and they kind of ranked, the reasons why that change was successful. And often these were technology projects. And at the bottom of the list, the sort of the least important but essential aspects were, the technology worked, we had project management rigor, we got the job done on time, those kinds of things. But the real high value aspects of successful sustainable change were all related to people, and it had to do with people understanding the new set of business processes, executive senior leadership, sponsorship, tying the work to the mission of the organization, all of the things that you're talking about, Dominic. So I think, in addition to the experience that you're bringing, as the literature certainly backs it all up. So love the approach.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And this really is it's a practical approach, because this is where the work happens in an institution, right? And these are the folks who have been, as I said earlier, mired in those workflow issues. No one understands it better. They are people likely, if you can maintain that university first approach, not entrenched in the way they do things either. They are open to talking to vendors that you might be working with, new partners that you're going to bring into the university, about best practice, right? So they're open to those conversations. I don't preclude management participating in these things. It's not like I'm trying to override a management participation in this. I do find that the interest levels are different, though, at the management, from a management perspective, than they would be from folks in the middle of the organization. I find that the middle of the organization is far more open to an approach like this, whereas managers are a little more intent on the department perspective, sometimes that individual perspective, than they are university first. So, and being in those roles, it's kind of, it's odd for me to say that at times, but I do find that as a reality, that when you get these people together and really they sit there and they start to talk about what they do every single day and how it works and how it doesn't work, then you really get to a very good place very quickly. And these conversations that we have about the work that we do every single day, they really are, if you shape these working groups correctly, and you shape the conversations so that they include everybody at that table, it's the nexus between positive disruption that you want to create, and then the sustainable change that that you need to create, right? So you try to find that intersection and where they're really going to blend. And I think these people, at least in the 4 times that I've done this now, this is the group that really does it best. And for the most part, these groups have continued to meet even well beyond a completion of an initiative, a completion of the project. So that's the nice thing. They form a bond that's somewhat unbreakable, and that's exactly what you want, because they become a go-to team at an institution, whether it's universities or, in my experience, in independent schools as well.
Good stuff, Dominic. The review process is something that you talked about a little bit, the functional choices, cloud narrative. Are those aspects of your process?
Sure. I think we get now into a little bit more of the functional piece here, which is, how do you actually get started on these things and do them well? I know there's, perhaps folks on the call who may not like the working group model because of the involvement, the amount of folks that get engaged in that, and sometimes it's hard to manage. But the reality is, for me, the working group has been, forming a working group has been instrumental in going through the review process, which starts with choosing the right partner. So, the obvious research that goes into who's doing the best work out there these days, and are those people that we now want to bring into our institution to talk to us and to present and to give us their ideas on how they might help us manage our day-to-day business, from ERP all the way through student information systems. So obviously we looked at, we look at all kinds of things, cloud native applications, mobile, traditional box versus microservices models, and rich API integrations, interoperability, analytics, reporting, machine learning, AI, et cetera. All of these things are terms that I'm sure everybody's familiar with. They're on your radar screen as you think about this. You think about the legacy systems that you have in place now. And in many cases, for example, at Jacksonville University, we talk about moving from 1985 to 2021, because that's really where we feel we are now. We are in a very old model.
Mm-hmm.
We're not implementing the next version of something. We're going from, the Earth to Mars. So it's a significant change for us. And I think that's actually helpful. I don't think it's one of those things where people get overwhelmed by it. I think they get very excited by the review process. So what we did at Jacksonville and at other institutions is we do our needs analysis early in the process. So as we form the working group, we actually go through the needs analysis and have folks put down their requirements, what it is they're looking for from a new system, what they do currently, what they would like to do better, what they can't do that they would like to be able to do, their ideal state in some ways. And then we use that to actually vet vendors. So who's going to be our new partner is based on some very good information that we have shared with each other as a working group.
Mm-hmm.
It's also good to do it early, because when you do choose your new partner and you get into the discovery process, it's already done. So you save yourself some weeks' work in advance there by doing this a little bit early. And then obviously in choosing the partner, it's, and Ted, I know you know this as well, it's philosophical choices, are we aligned regarding the future choices, directions, roadmap, integrity, commitment to innovation and new technologies. Well, I think we've all probably been around in our roles long enough to know that roadmaps sometimes are a little squishy, right? They're not exactly what they say they're going to be. So that for me is one of the most important things, is making sure we're choosing a partner that we feel comfortable with. They have some integrity. We talked about things like about roadmaps and what it really means to them, and that our thinking aligns. And lastly, negotiate, obviously, negotiate. So it's important to make sure that you're getting that stuff out of the way early in your deal, so that when you do commit to a partnership, that you're working on the same page with each other and moving along, and not saying, oh boy, I didn't know about that cost or this cost. So it's really due diligence in terms of making sure that you spend the time necessary to put the best deal in place for your institution, so that like most good deals, it goes into a drawer and you never look at it again for probably the decade plus that they're your partner.
Yeah, Dominic, looking back, what you started talking about is, as far as creating the working groups and kind of flipping the responsibility, so people are thinking university first. How many projects have many of us worked on where the project really starts when that partner comes in the door? Like, this sounds like you've really kind of backed this up to the university level and getting everybody involved. So you're working your way toward a partner relationship and making that right choice, right? So, I mean, and then I love the other part of what you're doing is you're creating the go-to team. It's like a ready team, for any crisis that's going to happen in the future. I mean, this is really what you're doing, is kind of preparing the university in ways they probably haven't worked this way before, correct?
Yeah, for the most part, they haven't. I shared with you, and I'll share with this group the same, that at one of the institutions where I worked, an independent school in New England, storied institution, and we started the working group, and I had two people on the working group, one from admissions and one from advancement, had both been at the academy for more than 10 years, and had never met each other. So here we are, introducing people who do critical work for the institution to each other for the first time. And now we're going to start talking about how their work influences other people's work within the organization. So it's very productive. It's a little scary at first for some people, and you have to get through that. I think flipping that thinking helps, because you then take them away from focusing on themselves as individuals or even their departments, and start to talk about how we can improve our institution, whether that's a university or an independent school. And that's very helpful in helping shape the conversations and keeping them moving along. So yeah, and the work, forming these working groups early is actually how you get to an ERP and a student information choice to begin with, right? Because if you start these conversations about our work together and where we can find improvements, if you do very quickly, especially if you've got legacy systems that are, a decade or a couple decades old, you very quickly get to the point where you're realizing there's not much we can do to improve with what we currently have. So this is a good opportunity to go out and look.
So Dominic and Ted, I'm sure you've been on a lot of these types of projects too. One of the things that Dominic said earlier was, you flip the thinking, but then, people get mired. They're mired. I love that word, because that's what happens, especially sometimes in our higher education environments, that, we're not always as progressive or able to be as progressive as we should be. To move the university ahead. So also what I'm hearing is that you're talking about people first, rather than a lot of projects in general, no matter what area of the university, are sometimes focused on project management of that project and outcomes and objectives. It sounds like to me you're talking more people first in the beginning and engaging them. And so how does that make it easier? Because when you say the word mired, it sounds like maybe this will take some time to work through. I mean, how do you meet those challenges?
Yeah, for me, the mired comment was more about bringing people together who are mired in the workflow issues of the institution, so that they understand better the constraints that they're under currently, and able to focus a little bit differently on what it is that would help them improve. So that's where I think the mired comment comes in for me. You're absolutely right. This is about community. This is about relationships first. And I think then from there, it's quite easy to have them start to think about the community as a whole, and improving areas where they're intimate with the details, right? So they know their work better than anyone else. They may not know how it impacts somebody else in the organization. So bringing them together to have lunch once a week to talk about those things leads you in a direction, I think, that is quite productive in terms of outcomes for this.
Ted, you've worked with a lot of higher eds. Do you find the same issue, people?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's all about getting people on board and aligned and motivated to do the work. Dominic, I had a question for you on this topic of this, the functional choices and philosophical choices. And this may be an oversimplification, but it's been my observation that, I've been around long enough that evaluation of either software or consulting services or whatever used to take the form of, many thousands of lines of requirements, and then, you map that against, some solution, and it's somewhat backward looking in that, does a solution or a set of solutions check all the boxes, versus the world that we're in now. In a cloud world, there's a well-known CIO who speaks often at EDUCAUSE and other events, who talks about subscribing to a stream of future functionality. So, I'm curious how you balance those two things at Jacksonville, the sort of, needing to know that there was, there's enough there for you to, kind of meet core requirements, but there's enough, also out in the future with confidence of getting there. You talked a bit about, getting that confidence in selecting the right partner. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how that went at Jacksonville and what your kind of perspective is on that.
Sure, absolutely. And I'll take a step back first, because we've done it, in my experience, we've done it a couple different ways. So what I call a needs analysis at Jacksonville University was very simply shaped as, let's talk about what it is that we do currently, what do we need to do, what do we want to do, and very quickly taking that to more of what would the ideal state be? What would it look like if we were able to turn over to a clean sheet of paper One of the things that we were able to do there is, if we look at our current system diagram, applications diagram, there's this core ERP, student information system, in the center of it with about 175 applications running around it, right? Satellite applications. And I'm sure others have their own nightmare scenario on their campus where you've just grown up and you now have 5 different survey tools that do the same thing. You have a bunch of reporting tools, 3 or 4 of them can do the exact same thing. It's just the way it works in institutions like ours. So what I've done is take that piece of paper when we started these conversations and turned it over and said, okay, now we're on the blank side. So if we could do this from scratch, what would it look like? And that's where at Jacksonville University, I think we did something a little differently than I did formally at, say, the independent school that I was just talking about, where we actually brought in Gartner to help us with a needs analysis, a requirements document. And to your point, that turned out to be, I think, between 1,600 and 1,800 bullet points that a vendor would have to look at and say, yeah, we're interested in being your partner. I never wanted to do that again because we had vendors drop out before they even started to talk to us, right? It was just a cumbersome effort to connect in a way that I didn't think was going to be productive the next time I was, able to do this, and we're doing it at Jacksonville a little differently. So I think there is some future consideration there. I like that, I like that approach where you are thinking about your partner in a little different way. They're thinking about you in a different way. They're not having to spend, think about it, weeks and weeks and weeks addressing your RFP, which is just a bunch of bullet points that, people sat with the Gartner rep and said, yeah, this is what I do. This is how I do it. So we shaped the conversation just a little bit differently. And I think in doing that, it's helpful for the institution, but it's also hugely helpful for your new partner, right? I mean, and you're gonna find out very quickly what it is that they can do, and a lot of it is you spend a little bit more time doing the reviews. So we started with 5 vendors. I started with actually 7 or 8 vendors, and then pared that list down to 5 to conduct our research with and do our reviews with. We narrowed that pool down to 3, and with those 3, we did multiple hour sessions. So we were getting into the deep dive eventually anyways, but at least you had the vendor wanting to participate with you from the beginning and not address a 16 to 1,800 point RFP.
Great, thank you, Dominic.
Yeah, anytime to.
So we talked about the, pulling together a team, the review process. I mean, really, you're preparing yourself to find out who this new partner will be, what the new system will be, because it's a big change, and it takes a lot of time and money for this project, one of the biggest projects in an institution. So, Dominic, can you talk a little bit about the implementation process? Once you get there, what's implementation like?
Yeah, sure. And the other piece of that, finishing in that second slide group there, the other piece of that is you're also, and that's fine, you're also preparing your own team for what comes next as well, right? Because the process, it's an iterative process anyways. They're aware of it, but typically they haven't been through it before, because you think of how many times this happens on a campus, it might be once every couple decades, right? So you're not doing this every 4 or 5 years. At least I hope you're not, because if you are, there's a likelihood that you've made a mistake somewhere along the way. But for the next, the implementation process, we talk about the importance of discovery, because that's really where you're learning a lot about what you thought your needs were going to be when you first put your needs analysis together and you were thinking about your ideal state. And what you're really trying to do is find that blend between what you consider to be an ideal state and what your new partner can do for you in that sense. And it's a follow-up on all the different sessions that you've had to make that choice for a new partner. And it's really now connecting and making sure that you're finding those opportunities within their new system. So there's a lot of best practice conversations that go on here. That's why I suggested earlier that in terms of moving from 1985 to 2021, that's an easy conversation to have, right? About best practice in, you know, in a modern environment versus something that feels a little old and kludgy to you. People generally get excited about what a new partner is telling them about what they're able to do and we're able to do with this kind of new information ecosystem that we're building for us, you know, building for ourselves on campus at this point. So I think that's critically important. I think the other piece of discovery that's really, really important is to take a step back first. You know, you want to be able to sit down and think a little bit about what it is that you're about to do and have those good conversations with your own team internally. So this extends beyond the working group. You know, so as I mentioned earlier, working groups for us were 20 to 25 people to begin with. That's fairly representative of the organization, a person or two from each of the areas that we talked about. When we did the reviews, we added more people. We added some faculty. We added students. We wanted a broader representation of the community looking at what was available for us. So the group grew to about 50. And now that we're doing discovery, the group grows to 200 to 250, because each of these people on the working group turns around to the department they work in and say, all right, now you're involved with us. Let's talk about this. You know, let's talk about what you're doing every day. Let's talk about what works well, what doesn't work well. Let us introduce you to our discovery partner from our, from our new partner. And let's talk about best practices using their new system. Does that make sense for us? So it's this really great back and forth conversation between the new partner, us, and our teams now, and involving them in the choices that we're about to make. So that's really the next piece of this slide, where it's engage the communication, the community, and being able to communicate what it is that you're doing with the community is just so important, because then they fully understand, where they are in the process, what's going to happen, their participation, what does it mean. They don't look at it like it's another meeting. They begin to look at it like, wow, I'm really being asked to participate in what this university looks like and what our day-to-day work looks like in the future. So they get excited about things like that. So training, testing, and more training and testing, obviously, as you start to build your system, and always the choice between a single go live and a phased approach. In our choice here, we're doing a single go live date because it makes the most sense for us as an institution. And in doing that, I think we get the value of building the system in the background and being able to do all of that training, all of that testing in advance, so that when we do turn it on, it's not a shock. It's not, oh my God, what have we done here? Is this going to work? It really is a fully vetted system that people are familiar with. They've been using, they've been trained on, and they're actually quite excited and anxious to get it going at that point. So, and you try to time that as best you can in terms of functionality and what's happening on campus at any given month. Most people on this call probably understand that there's really not a good time to do it. So you pick the best. It's not the only time you can do it. You just pick the best that's for you and your institution to actually go live. And then it's true, it's never really over. It's just the next phase. So the reality is, you don't go live and then everybody, just clap their hands and move on to whatever comes next. If you do this right, if you do it well, your working group really becomes an integral part of your institution's planning moving forward. How you engage the rest of the community about change moving forward, when you're adding systems, when you're deleting systems, just how to keep this thing running really well and turning over something quite good that you've been a part of, right? There's an old proverb. It's one generation plants the tree, another benefits from the shade. So there's a little bit of that going on here for folks too, I think, where, they get the sense that they're doing something and they're turning over something that really works well to others. And I think that's very helpful for them to realize that and to be engaged in that process.
Dominic, I just wanted to kind of roll back to you. We're talking about the working group, 25 people is a good amount. You have diversity in that working group, which is very helpful. as you move ahead in such a large and impactful project. But then you said, the working group kind of grows to as those people from the 25 people go into their department, start talking to numbers of individuals that could reach 200, 250. And I just wonder, as someone who's directing this project, again, we're not talking about the technical as much as the human factors and the social factors of getting this done. And I wonder if you could just speak to that, because that sounds a little unwieldy to me in some aspects.
Thank you. The working group doesn't grow to 250. The working group remains the same. So the working group really is the core group that's in charge of this product, in charge of the project. So the way I look at the working group, and we've talked about this, is they are the leaders, right? We're not asking them or telling them what we need them to do. They're coming up with leadership model here. They're saying, this is where we're taking this, and this is how we're doing it. When it grows to a couple hundred or 250 people participating, it really is the working group then working back through their departments to get the rest of the folks participating in the discovery phase. The working group is then working back through their discovery partner, who our new partner is, to make sure that all of that information is accounted for. So the working group really is the conduit to the conversations within our own university, and then the conversations that we're having with our new partner. In terms of voting for who we wanted to have as a new partner, even though we had 50 people participating in the review, they provided their feedback to the working group. And then we had 20, I think our working group at that point was 21 people. We had 21 people vote on who our new partner would be. Yeah, so it doesn't get unwieldy in that sense. That participation is important, but you do have to maintain that working group as more as a channel or a funnel for that information to come through.
Yeah, I think it just emphasizes the importance of the human factor and all of this, because you could ignore that and get to the end and find out you made lots of wrong decisions. So, I like how your process really emphasizes that and includes that as part of, the decision-making process. And that leads you to the right choices in the end, I would think.
Yeah, it not only leads you to the right choices, Carl, I think the other thing it does is if you've had this many people participate in the process and they found it to be open and fair and honest, and their participation was encouraged and supported all along the way, and they really do feel like they were leading something instead of just participating in something, then you also find that your final results are that much better because people really do buy into the end result.
That's great. Well, before I get to the next question, just wanted to roll another poll question because we are going to be coming up on time soon. The next poll question is, where are you in the process of your search? So if you're searching for a CIS-ERP system, you have no intention to change now or in the future. You're considering a change for something less expensive and easier to use, or you're actively searching and evaluating solutions. And if the attendees wouldn't mind just making a choice there in the next 30 seconds, we could get those poll results. One quick thing I just wanted to ask also, Dominic and Ted too, if you have input on this, is memorializing this information as you move along and documenting it. What kind of a repository do you create or reporting? So you're working with the working group, but I'm thinking also of the cabinet, the president, the trustees, and others who probably need to get summarized versions of this and see the progress. How do you report up?
So from my perspective, it's varied at the institution where I've done this in the past. It depended on what the president and the cabinet level or senior administration really wanted. In a couple of those institutions, I was part of that senior administration, my role. So we would report out regularly on this in those meetings. The other thing we've always done is encourage the senior leadership of each of these departments to meet regularly with the folks on the working group who are part of their team. Because there's always the issue of constraint in time.
Right.
And, you're adding, and especially in a pandemic, as you can imagine, we're adding more to people who are already doing more work with fewer individuals anyways, because we've all suffered in one way or another in terms of revenues, and there've been cutbacks and things like that. So I always stress the importance of the senior administration asking the questions of the folks who are on the working group in their departments at their regular meetings, usually, once every couple of weeks or once every month or so. And then I report back through the president and the senior administration when they meet regularly as well. And we do updates on this. So, you avoid surprises that way. And I think it's usually very good.
Great, good.
I would agree with all of that, Carl. If I could add just a couple of thoughts on, I do think that it is important to really understand your audience when reporting out and providing communications. I've seen some presentations to senior leadership go horribly wrong because they immediately dive into a level of detail that is neither understood nor appreciated. So I think spending the time to understand what does the project team need in terms of information, what does management, senior leadership, what do governance bodies, what do they care about the most, and really sort of tailoring those communications to each one of those groups, I think is important. I've seen it done poorly more times than I've seen it done well. So if there's a takeaway there, I would say spend the time doing some audience analysis as you're building your communication plan.
Great feedback, thank you. Just wanted to cover the results of the last poll. Where are you in the process of your search? Well, about 16% of our audience said there no intention of changing. We're good for now. Most of our audience answered in the gray area, considering a change for something less expensive and easier to use. I think a lot of people are looking for that now, but they find it a daunting task because it is expensive, does take time. And talk about business disruption, right? I mean, this is really going to put a lot of time commitments on existing staff and faculty. Also, at about 35% said actively searching and evaluating. So that's a larger number than I thought. There's actually out there looking for new solutions. So looks like most people are at least thinking about it and considering it. Ted, I just wanted to, kind of give you a few minutes to, if there's any other items that you could address from a higher education, perspective in terms of this search, evaluation, execution project that many universities have been probably putting off. They're afraid of it. They don't want to get involved because, right now with the pandemic, and I know so many colleges and universities and K through 12s too, that now have lost enrollment, they've lost budget, they've lost staffing and positions. And is this really a good time to think about reinventing your SysERP system?
Yeah, Carl, I think rather than jumping into the prepared slides, I think that's a great segue into the first question we got from my old friend Kwan, and I'll read it to the group. And it's, given your experience, what functional or technical limitations of existing SIS products have been exposed due to the COVID crisis? I think that's a great question. And Carl, I think it goes to the heart of what you're asking. And we've seen a lot of this over the past year. And, as universities have tried to, and I think most have been fairly successful in responding to the pandemic. But, overnight, a lot of things were put on the table. And those were, new and flexible semesters. I was working with one university that has never had a summer semester, and they decided in April of 2020 to create a new summer offering.
Wow.
And it really forced the issue: do we have the time to set that up and not only do all of the lining up all the faculty and the students and the space and the virtual space and all of that, but do we even have the the system infrastructure to set up a new semester that quickly, and all of the things went through it. That combined with prorating refunds for tuition and housing, all of these things that universities had never done before. And I think that did expose some of the, sort of cemented in processes and features and functions in existing SIS offerings, whether they're legacy, on premise or even new cloud solutions. So I think it was the lesson learned there is universities found that even who've been inflexible for many years found themselves in a position where in order to salvage the academic year, they had to become way more flexible than they ever had before, and didn't have the time to kind of go through all of the decision-making processes and getting consensus and things like this. They were acting quickly, and really their systems, I think, were lagging often to catch up to a lot of the decisions being made. And I think as we move, thankfully, hopefully soon, kind of out of this pandemic, I think a lot of those flexible options will likely stay for some period of time, even if it's in the sort of near term. And I think universities are going to have to maintain that comfort level of adjusting to things more quickly than they ever have before.
That was great insight. I just wanted to take a minute to talk about our last quick poll here for our audience. And if you replaced or upgraded your CCRP, would you have enough staff and buy-in from the academic and administrative community on your campus? Precisely what we've been talking about is the buy-in and the support from the community. Very, very important. And the choices are, yes, it would be more work for us, but we could make it a priority and make it happen, or maybe, but we would need some other support and training. Or no, not at all. Even though we could use a new system, we just don't have the bandwidth. And you hear that so often today. So a lot of people are stuck in a difficult position. A lot of institutions where they need to make a change. 9 times out of 10, student information system and ERPs are the biggest line item in an IT budget, and growing. Cost is also a factor. And is that discussed in any of the discovery processes and working groups that you work with? Either of you, with any customers, in terms of the budget, because budget is front and center today for many institutions.
Yeah, I think, Carl, if there's a trend that I'm seeing among our clients, it is in trying to kind of, I guess, rationalize the IT spend is the way I would describe that. We have the bigger the university, the bigger the proliferation of various systems that do one thing or another. Like Dominic said, you end up with 5 survey tools, and so I think that there's been a lot of focus at a lot of universities we work with at trying to kind of narrow the number of vendors that they're working with, and try to standardize some of those functions on a campus, so that you're not trying to manage 10 scheduling systems or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, same for us, Carl. The approach has been, if you remember the discussion about the satellite application map that we have on our campus.
Right.
This is about creating efficiencies and saving money by the time we're done. I think as an institution, we're paying about $1.7 million a year in annual maintenance fees. By going through this process, this initiative, we're substantially reducing our annual maintenance fees by reducing the number of these satellite applications that we have on campus, just through the process of review, right?
Yeah, it sounds like this is an investment not just in the future of the institution, but it's really a cost savings exercise to some extent, because how inefficiently are you using your legacy system now, and how much money are you losing by continuing to use it the way it is? So not only can you gain efficiencies, right, just by establishing a new system that's very relevant and very connected to everybody and everything in the university, but you could wind up, as you're doing, Dominic, kind of saving some bottom line dollars there, significant dollars. So that's good information. Here's the result of the poll, the last poll. If you replaced or upgraded your CCRP, would you have enough staff and buy-in from the community on your campus? And, again, another little bit of a surprise here. Most folks are reporting, yes, it would be more work, but we could make it work. We could make it a priority. A lot of people are, I'm not sure quite yet. And the 19% said no, even though we could use a new system, we just can't do it. And seeing that so often out there today with so many people that are struggling to make it, especially from the impact of the pandemic. Hopefully, as people begin to return to campus, as campuses reopen, I don't think anything's ever going to go back to 100% normal. I think the mobile workforce, online learning is definitely going to have impacts on everyone's future. But hopefully we'll also see campuses return to somewhat normal in the future. I want to thank both of you for your expertise and your experience and your advice. I think, I walked away with some great ideas and hope for a project that can be very large and people would like to avoid, that it can be done. And that there is a big emphasis on people, kind of taking the people approach to it, certainly makes it sound achievable. So I appreciate both of your participation. Do want to point to the Campus Consortium can assist in connecting you with peer advisors and consultants. And if you want to reach out to us, we can make those connections. Also want to thank our sponsor today, Huron Consulting Group. Appreciate you helping bring this information to our higher education community. I want to thank everybody that attended today and participated in the poll questions. We'll get this information out to everybody soon. We'll also put the poll information into a research packet and share that out with folks too, so you can see what people are saying that is happening on their campuses. Again, thanks to our presenters today, much appreciated. And thanks to all our attendees. And we'll see you next time on Campus Consortium EdTalks.
Thanks, Carl.